David never thought a single moment could erase a lifetime of memories. Until the crash. 1 second, the world was normal. Music playing, headlights flashing, his future glowing bright in his mind. The next, everything collapsed. Metal twisted like paper, glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and flames crawled over his skin like hungry beasts. In those seconds of chaos, his old life died. When he opened his eyes in the hospital days later, he met a face he did not recognize. The mirror showed him a stranger. His skin stitched together with scars, burns, and jagged lines, a canvas of pain that told stories he never wanted anyone to read. He touched the reflection with trembling fingers, his throat burning as he muttered, "Well, isn't this just perfect?" His voice was low, bitter, dipped in sarcasm he didn't even feel. The sound echoed in the small room, hollow, empty, almost mocking him. Exactly what I needed. The ultimate welcome to life. But the accident wasn't the sharpest knife. No, the real dagger came later. She came. The woman he loved. The one who once whispered, "Forever." She stood by his bed, eyes darting away from his face as if looking at him was a punishment. Her words still rang in his head, as sharp and merciless as the crash itself. "You're too broken. No one will ever love you." He laughed then. Not the kind of laugh that brings joy, but a laugh that cracked like glass under pressure. A dry, painful sound. "Too broken? Wow, thanks. Really? I guess I needed a PhD in heartbreak just to qualify for this insult." Her silence was answer enough. She left, and David never saw her again. Days blurred into weeks, weeks dragged into months. The cheerful young man who once lit up rooms with laughter was gone. Bitterness settled into his bones and made a home there. His voice, once warm and playful, now sounded like gravel, rough, dry, drained of every ounce of joy. The nurses dreaded entering his room. At first, they tried, offering polite smiles, cheerful words, promises that things will get better. But David had no patience left. His eyes burned with anger every time they spoke. "Save the fake sympathy," he would snap, his words sharp enough to cut. When they adjusted his bandages, he flinched, not from the sting of pain, but from disgust at the pity in their eyes. He saw it. He always saw it. And behind his back, they laughed. "That's him, the scarred one. Looks like thunder every time he opens his mouth." Their whispers pierced deeper than the accident ever could. David heard them. He always heard them, and every laugh, every cruel word was another nail in the coffin of who he used to be. And his friends? They disappeared. At first, the texts came in. "Get well soon, bro. You'll be fine." Empty words typed with half-hearted concern. But soon, even those faded. Calls stopped. Birthdays passed. His phone stayed silent. It was as though David had died, and only his scarred body refused to follow. So he stopped trying. "Why bother?" he muttered to himself. "People only love you when you're whole." Even at home, the mirror became his only company. Every night, he sat in front of it, staring at the stranger staring back. His eyes were hollow, sunken, lifeless. His scars weren't just burns and cuts. They were betrayal. They were abandonment. They were cruel laughter stitched into his very skin. Sometimes he pressed his forehead against the cold glass and whispered, "Who are you? Because I don't know you anymore." And the reflection never answered. The truth was unbearable. David had become a man even he couldn't stand. Cold, harsh, bitter. If kindness had ever lived in him, it was now buried under layers of rage and despair. Once upon a time, he had dreamed of marriage, children, love, and laughter filling his home. Now he dreamed of nothing. He didn't live. He simply existed, enduring one more day, one more cruel laugh, one more reminder that he was unwanted. And yet, deep in his chest, there lingered a fear, a whisper, a thought that chilled him more than the scars ever could. What if this was only the beginning? What if fate wasn't done breaking him? And gradually, his health deteriorates more and more, and he is rushed back to the hospital. A few months after the crash, the hospital received a new transfer. Sarah, 25, bright-eyed and gentle, stepped into the ward, her bag slung over her shoulder, her white coat crisp and spotless. She had heard about David, though not the full story, just whispers. The scarred patient doesn't talk, avoids everyone, dangerous to your nerves if you're kind. The nurses avoided him like the plague. Every time they passed his room, their steps quickened, eyes shifting away, pretending the patient didn't exist. They muttered about his temper, his sarcastic remarks, his bitterness. Sarah paused outside the door. She didn't flinch. She didn't hurry past. She simply observed. Inside, David laid on the bed, staring at the wall as if it held the secrets of the universe. His scars caught the harsh fluorescent lights, making him look even more isolated, more untouchable. When he noticed Sarah watching, his brow furrowed, lips curling into the smallest hint at scorn. "Well, what do we have here?" he muttered to himself, voice low, bitter. "Another angel come to play nurse. Great, just what I needed." Sarah stepped in quietly, careful not to startle him. "Hi, I'm Sarah," she said softly, offering her hand. Her smile wasn't forced. It didn't try to charm. It just existed. Warm, calm, steady. David's eyes narrowed. He didn't move. He didn't shake her hand. "Yeah, I know. Another nurse like the rest. Going to fake a smile, pity me, then leave." She noticed how the other nurses glanced nervously at him, avoided eye contact, hurried past the room like he carried a contagious illness, and yet she didn't turn away. "Is it really that bad?" she asked softly, more to herself than to him, watching the way his hands trembled as he adjusted the blanket on his lap. "Your scar is on your face, not on your heart, sir." David didn't answer. His silence wasn't polite. It wasn't contemplative. It was sharp, defensive, like a steel door closing in her face. "Don't waste your breath," he muttered under his breath. But there was a flicker, barely perceptible, of curiosity in his eyes. For the first time in months, someone stayed in his room without fear. Didn't flinch, didn't glance away, didn't whisper behind his back, just looked. Sarah crouched slightly to meet his eye level, careful not to invade his space. "I know people have avoided you," she said gently, "but I don't see what they see. I just see a person who's been hurt." David let out a short, humorless laugh. "Hurt? That's cute. Everyone wants to use a word like that. Hurt. You don't know hurt. Not really." Sarah didn't reply. She simply nodded, letting him speak, letting him exist without judgment. And for reasons he couldn't explain, David found himself studying her, noticing how her eyes didn't shy away, how her smile wasn't fake, how she treated him like he still mattered. "Most nurses just look away," he finally muttered, voice low and reluctant. "Pretend I'm not here. Makes it easier." "I've noticed," Sarah replied softly. "But ignoring someone doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes the world colder." David stared at her, wary, suspicious. You think you're different. That's cute. But you're just like them, aren't you? Another do-gooder pretending to care. Another angel with a white coat who'll leave and laugh at me behind. Sarah only smiled, unshaken. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. For the first time in months, someone stayed in his room without fear, without judgment. And though he would never admit it out loud, that small difference, the way she didn't flinch, shook something deep inside him. Something buried under layers of anger, bitterness, and pain. The ward was quiet that evening. Most patients were asleep. The fluorescent lights dimmed, leaving the halls in a dull glow. Sarah lingered in David's room, tidying his bedside table, though she had finished her duties long ago. She stayed because she noticed something. David wasn't asleep. He was staring at the ceiling, eyes open, lost in some faraway place. Without looking at her, his voice broke the silence, low, rough, almost reluctant. You know, I wasn't always like this. Sarah paused, hands resting on the table. She turned slowly, surprised that he was speaking to her, really speaking, not snapping, not muttering. David's eyes flickered to her, then back to the ceiling. Before this, before the scars, before the accident, I was handsome, too handsome for my own good. His lips curled into a bitter half-smile. Ladies used to fight over me. I couldn't walk into a room without someone turning their head. You should have seen me. Life was a game and I was winning. He laughed, but it was hollow, drenched in sorrow. Now look at me. The same women who once smiled at me can't even look at me anymore. They stare, then turn away like I'm some nightmare they're scared to wake up in. Friends gone. The woman I loved. She told me I was too broken, and just like that, poof. He made a dismissive gesture with his hand. Everyone left. Everyone. The room was heavy with silence. David's voice cracked as he added softly, "Do you know what it feels like? To be abandoned when you need people the most. To become invisible in the very world where you once shined." Sarah's eyes softened. She took a quiet step closer, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. David's brow furrowed. He turned to face her fully, his expression skeptical. "What could you possibly know about this kind of hurt?" She inhaled deeply, her chest rising as if she were gathering courage. Then she sat down in the chair beside his bed, folding her hands in her lap. "I lost my parents when I was 18, she said quietly. "One accident, and suddenly I had no home, no family, no one. Life didn't wait for me to grieve. It slapped me, mocked me, and dared me to survive. I worked jobs that broke my back, ate food that barely kept me alive, and slept in places I wouldn't even call safe. But I survived. Yes, I did. And that survival came with scars too. Not the kind you see in a mirror, but the kind that burn here." She pressed a hand to her chest. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "That's why. Whenever I see a hurt person, I recognize it. 'Cause I've lived it. I know that pain." David blinked, stunned into silence. For a moment, he didn't have sarcasm. He didn't have anger, just silence. He studied her face, looking for a lie, waiting for a crack in her story, but there was none. Her eyes shone with raw truth. His lips parted, but no words came. His throat tightened. He wanted to scoff, to push her away, to remind her that she couldn't possibly understand his pain. But for the first time in months, he hesitated. Sarah smiled faintly. Not a smile of pity, but of quiet strength. "So, when I see you sitting here, hurting, pushing everyone away, I don't see a monster. I don't see a man too broken to be loved. I just see someone drowning, and I won't walk away from that." David let out a shaky breath. His hand twitched as though he wanted to reach for something, but he quickly clenched it into a fist. His voice was low when he finally replied. He'll leave eventually. Everyone does. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her eyes firm, her tone soft but resolute. Then let me be the exception. The words hung in the air, heavy, powerful, unbelievable. For the first time since the accident, David didn't feel completely alone. A few days later, one morning Sarah walked in carrying his medication, her voice cheerful in a way that felt almost annoying to David. "Good morning, Mr. David. The sun's shining today. Perfect day to take a walk, don't you think?" David's head jerks toward her with a half smirk, half snarl. "Walk? Do you see me? What do you expect? Me parading round like some beauty pageant contestant? Save the pep talk for someone whose face doesn't scare a mirror." Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she placed the tray on the table and leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her eyes locked on him. So what? You gonna rot here because you don't like your reflection? Congratulations, that's a very brave way to waste a life. Her sarcasm slid through the room like a blade. David blinked, taken aback. Nobody, absolutely nobody spoke to him like that anymore. Most just pitied him, avoided him, or whispered about him outside his door. This woman was standing there, fearless, daring him. "Why'd you even bother?" he muttered, bitterness weighing down his tone. Sarah's eyes softened. "Because when I was broken, I had no one. No hand to hold, no shoulder to cry on. I had to stitch myself back together with nothing but will. If I survived, then I know others can too. Even you." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in months, David didn't have a ready insult. The next day, Sarah came in again, this time holding not just his medication, but a pair of sneakers. She placed them by his bed. "What is this?" he frowned. "Shoes," she said plainly. "Most people wear them when they step outside." David let out a dry laugh, the sound rusty, as though his throat had forgotten how. "You're insane." "Good," Sarah replied. "It takes insane to fight death when it stares at you." It wasn't easy. At first, David refused. His body stiffened, his scars burning like fresh wounds at the idea of facing sunlight, but Sarah was relentless. She joked, she teased, she pushed him. "Come on, tough guy, show me you're not afraid of 2 legs and gravity." And so, one trembling morning, David did it. With Sarah's hand steadying him, he took his first step outside his room. The corridor felt foreign, the light blinding, the stares from others piercing, but there he was, standing, breathing. Sarah smiled wide, like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "See? You didn't melt." David shook his head, but the corner of his lips tugged upward. A smile, small, cracked, but real. The first in a long, long time. And Sarah? She courted. Her heart leapt. He can still smile. He can still live. That night, David sat by the mirror again. But this time, instead of cursing at the scars, he whispered something he hadn't said in years. "Maybe," he paused, his throat tight. "Maybe I'm not done yet." At the nurse's station, 2 nurses peeked over, giggling behind their hands. "Look at Sarah," one whispered, "making a fool of herself for the beast." The other snickered louder. "What a waste of effort. Scarred men don't smile, they rot." David's laughter died instantly. His body stiffened. He heard every word. Normally, this was the moment he would shrink back into himself, turn away, hide behind silence. But Sarah didn't give him the chance. She leaned in close to him, her voice low but cutting through the hallway like a blade. "Let them laugh. They need it more than you do. At least yours is real." David turned his face toward her, his eyes burning, not with shame, but with something else. Defiance. Gratitude. A spark of life. For once, he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't cover his scars. He stood tall, shoulders back, as if daring the nurses to keep mocking him. And in that moment, Sarah realized something powerful. David wasn't broken. He was just waiting for someone brave enough to remind him that he could still live. 6 months later, the day of the surgery came like a heavy storm. For weeks, Sarah had watched David's courage slowly grow, one step at a time, one laugh at a time, but now it all came crashing down into this single moment. Another surgery had been done on his face, Painful, risky, but necessary. And now, the bandages had to come off. The room was tense. A thick silence lingered in the air as if everyone was holding their breath. David sat on the hospital bed, stiff and restless, his hands trembling slightly against his knees. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. I don't think I can do this, David whispered, his voice breaking, almost childlike. Sarah was standing beside him, her eyes fixed firmly on him, her presence calm but strong. She bent closer, resting her hand gently over his fist. "David, listen to me," she said softly, her tone steady. "You've been hiding from your reflection for too long. Today is not just about your face, it's about your courage. You survived what no one thought you could, and now it's time to see yourself whole again." David shook his head violently, pulling back a little. His breathing grew shallow, and fear clouded his eyes. What if I'm still the monster they said I was? What if nothing changed? What if I open my eyes and see that same horror staring back at me? Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, leaning close so he couldn't look away. Her voice dropped, low and fierce. "Then we fight again, together. But you are not a monster, David. You never were. You are a man who walked through fire and lived, and I will not let you hide from yourself any longer." The nurses hovered nearby, curious, whispering, some exchanging glances. A few even smirked, expecting David to break down again, expecting another moment of weakness. But Sarah ignored them completely. Her entire focus was locked on him. The doctor stepped forward, his gloved hands hovering at David's bandages. "We'll take it slow," he murmured. David's chest rose and fell, each breath heavy, uneven. His body was shaking, his palms damp. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure if the ground beneath him would hold. Then Sarah lifted his hand and pressed it to her heart. He could feel the steady thump of her heartbeat against his palm. Strong, unwavering. "Feel that?" she whispered. "That's me, right here. As long as I'm breathing, you're not alone. Open your eyes when it's time and see what I already see. A man worth fighting for." The first bandage came off. David flinched, his body jerking as if the removal itself would reveal something unbearable. His eyes squeezed shut, teeth grinding together. Sarah's grip didn't loosen. "Breathe, David," she urged. "Just breathe with me." Second bandage. Third. Slowly the gauze was peeled away, layer by layer. The air in the room grew heavier. Nurses leaned in, whispering, their curiosity thick with judgment. Some expected scars that would scare some. Some secretly hoped for a spectacle. Finally, the last strip of bandage slid free. The doctor gave a soft nod, stepping back. "It's done." Sarah's hand tightened over David's. Her voice was barely a whisper now, yet it carried like thunder to him. "Open your eyes." But David couldn't. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched, his eyelids pressed down as if glued shut. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Her tone sharpened, filled with urgency. "David, this is the moment. The world has laughed at you, mocked you, pushed you into the shadows. Don't let them win. Don't let your fear decide who you are. Open your eyes." The room was still. The nurses stopped whispering. Everyone waited. Slowly, painfully, David's eyes fluttered open. His gaze darted to the mirror in front of him. For a heartbeat, he froze. His reflection stared back at him. The burns were still there, yes, but softened, healed, shaped. His features looked more like the man he remembered. Sharp jawline, strong cheekbones, eyes that carried depth. Not the same as before, but not destroyed either. For the first time in months, his reflection didn't feel like a stranger. Just then, David dialed his mother's number. His hands trembled as he held the phone to his ear, his voice breaking with emotions he'd buried for months. "Hello, mine," he whispered, his eyes flickering towards Sarah, who stood silently by his side. There was a sharp gasp from the other end, a woman's voice, trembling, desperate. "David? My son? Is this really you?" Tears spilled from David's eyes. "Yes, Mom, it's me. I'm alive." His throat tightened. "I ran away because I couldn't stand the scars on my face. I thought you wouldn't want to see me like that. I thought everyone I loved would turn their back on me." The sound that came from his mother was both a cry and a scream. loud enough that Sarah could hear it through the phone. "Don't you ever say that again. You are my son, my only son. How could you think I wouldn't want you? Oh, David, you've been gone for so long. Every day I prayed to see you again. Where are you right now? Tell me." David swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "I'm at Gracefield Hospital in Hertford City. I will share the location." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then his mother's voice came, strong and determined through her tears. "Just hold on for me, my son. I will be there first thing in the morning. Nothing will stop me." As the call ended, David collapsed back onto the chair, covering his face with his hands. His shoulders shook violently, not from pain, but from relief. Sarah knelt in front of him, her soft hand brushing his arm. "David, you're not alone anymore," she said gently. His eyes lifted to hers, red and glassy. "Sarah, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know how my mom will react when she sees me. What if—" "Stop," Sarah interrupted firmly, pressing her finger against his lips. "You've already seen what happened when you looked in the mirror. You're healed. You're whole. Tomorrow, your mother won't just see her son. She'll see the miracle she's been praying for." David drew in a shaky breath. He had faced surgery, loneliness, shame, but this? Facing his mother again after disappearing from her life? That was the scariest thing of all. Yet, as he looked at Sarah, steady and unshaken by all his fears, a small smile crept onto his lips. For the first time, he wasn't scared of tomorrow. He was ready. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, the silence of the hospital grounds was broken by the sudden roar of engines. Black SUVs, polished to a shine, streamed into the compound one after the other. The hospital guards stiffened immediately, then saluted sharply as the vehicles rolled to a halt. Out of the first car stepped uniformed policemen, scanning the premises with sharp eyes, instantly creating a wall of security. Nurses and patients near the entrance stopped what they were doing, whispering among themselves in shock. "Who is coming here this early with this kind of power?" a young nurse gasped. Another answered in awe, "Don't you know? That's the entourage of one of the most powerful women in this country." And then she appeared, dressed in a flowing silk attire with subtle golden embroidery. Her presence commanded silence. She was tall, regal, with a face the entire nation had seen on TV screens and magazine covers countless times. David's mother. Her eyes, however, were not on the policemen, not on the nurses who bowed at her arrival, but searching desperately, searching for her son. Inside the hospital ward, David stood anxiously, Sarah at his side. He hadn't seen his mother since the day of his accident, since he had disappeared from the world to hide his shame. His heart pounded heavily, unsure of what her reaction would be. The door burst open, and then time seemed to freeze. "David," her voice cracked, breaking into a sob as she rushed forward. She didn't care about the grandeur of her status or the stares of her entourage. She threw her arms around her son, clutching him as if to make up for every lost day, every sleepless night she had cried for him. My son, you're alive. I thought I had lost you forever." Tears streamed down her face, soaking into his shirt. David closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of his mother's embrace. He held her back, his own tears rolling silently. "I'm sorry, Mother. I ran away because I couldn't stand seeing myself. I couldn't stand people staring at me," David said softly, his voice thick with emotion. His mother pulled back, just enough to cup his heel face in her hands, staring into his eyes. "Look at you. My son is handsome again. Even if you had scars forever, you would still be my pride. Don't you ever forget that." Sarah stood quietly by the side, her heart touched deeply by the rawness of the reunion. But then David reached for her hand and gently pulled her forward. "Mother," he said, his voice steady, proud. "This is Sarah. She is the one who stood by me when I had nothing left. She is the reason I found my courage again. If you see me smiling, if you see me standing here, it's because of her. His mother turned her gaze to Sarah. The hospital seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, the powerful woman's expression softened into warmth. She stepped closer, and to Sarah's shock, she bowed her head slightly in respect. "My dear," she said, taking Sarah's hand into hers. "Thank you for saving my son. Not just his life, but his spirit. You are welcome into this family." Gasps filled the hallway. Maids whispered in disbelief. Nurses exchanged wide-eyed looks. "Did you hear that? The most powerful woman in the country just accepted her." As the entourage escorted them out of the hospital, the scene was unforgettable. Policemen cleared the path. People bowed as David and Sarah walked hand in hand beside his mother. Some patients pressed their faces against the windows. Others murmured with tears in their eyes. "Doing good is the best. That girl's kindness brought her into greatness." Phones were already out. Flashes went off. By the time they stepped into the waiting SUVs, one thing was certain. The story of Sarah and David would spread far beyond the hospital walls. The next morning, after David's mother swept into the hospital with her powerful entourage, the news spread like wildfire. Within hours, journalists gathered outside the hospital gates, their cameras flashing, their microphones raised. The story of the hidden son of a national prominent figure became the #1 headline everywhere. But what shocked everyone even more was Sarah's name on their lips. Who is this young lady that stood by him when the world abandoned him? The mystery nurse who healed not just his face, but his heart. From ordinary caregiver to the future bride of a nation's son. Sarah's pictures, her simple smile, her tender moments pushing David to laugh again, flooded social media. Every major TV station replayed the footage of David kneeling at the hospital reception, asking her to marry him. The nurses who once mocked her now sat glued to their phones, their mouths wide open, some whispering, "Is that really Sarah? The same girl we laughed at?" Sarah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Strangers sent her thousands of messages, calling her an angel, a blessing, even a national treasure. Brands wanted her face for their products. The hospital hallways buzzed with journalists begging for an interview. David, on the other hand, held her hand tighter than ever. He didn't let the storm swallow her. Every time a camera flashed, he turned to Sarah and whispered, "Don't be afraid. You are mine, and I'll protect you." And then came the biggest twist, the wedding announcement. David's mother, who was both powerful and deeply moved by Sarah's loyalty, stood before the press and declared, "My son almost lost himself. But this young woman, this Sarah, gave him life again. I do not just accept her, I bless her to be my daughter." The country erupted. Sarah, the once ordinary nurse mocked by her colleague, was suddenly the most celebrated woman in the nation. Magazines called her the woman who restored a billionaire's son. Songs were composed about her. Poets praised her loyalty. The wedding was a spectacle like no other. Dignitaries, politicians, celebrities, and foreign guests filled the grand hall. Cameras flashed like lightning as Sarah walked down the aisle in a breathtaking gown, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. David stood at the altar, his face fully healed, his heart bursting with love. When he said, "I do," the nation held its breath. When Sarah whispered, "I do," the entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. Back at the hospital, the mocking nurses sat in the lounge, watching the live broadcast. They couldn't believe their eyes. The same girl they once belittled was now the wife of a man the whole world admired. Some bit their lips in regret. Some shook their heads in disbelief. One whispered softly, "Doing good is truly the best." As Sarah and David kissed under the golden lights, the camera zoomed in. The nation saw not just a wedding, but a miracle. Proof that kindness could rewrite destiny, and that sometimes the simplest act of love could turn an ordinary girl into the most extraordinary bride. Hello, besties. Thank you so much for watching this beautiful story to the very end. What do you think about David and Sarah's journey? Do you believe true love can heal even the deepest wounds? Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and drop your thoughts in the comment section. In your own language, I'd love to read them all. See you in the next story, besties. Stay blessed and keep spreading love. Be